Hello everyone. The chapter that we are going to study today is the last lesson written by Alphonse Daudet. The name of this chapter, lesson, refers to the last French lesson taught by M. Hamel in the class. The story starts from I started till what can be the matter now. Narrator, the writer, is a little boy named Franz. He begins by narrating how, as usual, he was late for the school. He was scared of the scolding from his teacher. The name of his teacher was M. Hamel because he was not prepared for the test of the chapter Participles. Participle is a grammar topic. What are participles? Participles are those words which combine the functions of adjectives and verbs. Different thoughts were swirling in his mind. Now, while he was walking for the school, he saw a pleasant weather. He wished of spending his day out there. He was not willing to go to class. He loved the chirping of birds. He also saw Persian soldiers exercising in the open field at the back of Swamel. Swamel is a factory for cutting wood. The beauty of nature was much more attractive than the school, but still, narrator, being very strong willed, overcame all his thoughts and rushed for his school. Passing the town hall it is a kind of an area, he saw a crowd in front of the bulletin board. Bulletin board is the news board. It is the board where the news were displayed. So, according to the narrator's perception, the board had all the bad and sad news. He never wanted to stop there. The next part of the explanation begins from the line, Then, as I hurried, till his frilled. Now, the narrator was crossing the bulletin board, the news board. He also came across the blacksmith, a person who makes iron tools, and the waiter. It's a German name for the watchman. The watchman, along with his trainee, was reading the bulletin. Meanwhile, he also shouted, advising the narrator to go slowly as he had enough time for school. Narrator thought as he was being mocked because he already knew that he was late for the school. Finally, he reached his school, and that morning he observed an unusual calmness in the school atmosphere. The school atmosphere was not as usual, noisy. That day it was very still, calm. There was no noise heard as of desks. Every day the noise of desk used to be heard. Number of lessons going on simultaneously in the classes. Today everything was silent. Usually they have to close their ears to understand the voice. Teacher's ruler used to strike the table time and again, but today nothing as that was there. Complete silence. As he was struggling to reach his seat in the class without being noticed by anyone, because in the noise it is very easy to go and settle down in the class, but when everything is still, it was difficult for the narrator to be seated because he was already late for the class. That is why the noise and the confusion was noted by him. He compares the stillness in the school to Sundays, as the school remains closed on Sundays. Now, the next scene of the class is he could see his classmates sitting in the class and his teacher, M. Hamel, taking rounds with an iron ruler as usual. He was ashamed of being late, with his face turned red out of nervousness. He feared scolding as he had to enter the class in front of everyone. To the narrator's astonishment, M. Hamill treated him very politely that day and asked him to be seated very nicely, in a very kind gesture. Being relaxed, he noticed his teacher in his best dress, the green coat. That day, his teacher, M. Hamill, he was dressed in one of his best dresses, a frilled shirt. Frilled means a long, narrow stripes of clothes with folds on it. The next part of the explanation begins from "and the little black silk cap" till "and now I understood." Now, as little Franz, he saw his teacher in the best green coat, best dress. M. Hamill was wearing a beautiful black silken cap also, with embroidery on it all over. He used to dress up as that only during special days of the school, as inspection or prize distribution days. Everybody in the class seemed very serious. The last benches of his class, his means little Fran's class, that used to be vacant every day, were occupied today by the villagers, including the former mayor, an old hosier, the former postmaster, and other people. Now, what was hosier having? The question is, the people, this was out of astonishment. The little Franz could see that the village people were sitting at the back benches. The benches were occupied today. Earlier they used to be empty. Now the hosier, he was having an old reader, a kind of diary, which was torn from the corners. He placed it open on his knees. Might be he had to read something, or he had to write in that diary something. Next, M. Hamill, moving forward, went up on his chair, addressing the school or addressing the class with his last French lesson. Now, this was a new thing that little Franz, the narrator, came to know, that that particular day it was the last French lesson M. Hamill was going to deliver them. And this news was already displayed on the news board. Unexpectedly, the class clapped loudly and the narrator developed a sudden interest for French. Now, suddenly, narrator developed interest for that language which he was never interested in. The thoughts in the mind of narrator were how the lesson can be the last one. He wanted to learn French completely. Today he was feeling interested in the lesson and he was thinking that I want to learn this language. He felt guilty of himself for being a non-serious student, as he preferred looking out for bird's egg or moving smoothly without being noticed by anyone by the river which passed through France. Now the whole story is revolving around France. Suddenly, the books he never liked, as of grammar and history, seemed to be his old friends. M. Hamill was a strict and a short-tempered teacher, but the parting from M. Hamill developed sympathy in narrator's heart. The teacher was always very disciplined and a strict teacher. This little Franz, he never liked his teacher, but today when he came to know that it was his last French lesson, it was the last French class, today he had a soft corner for his teacher as well as the language. He realized the purpose of being best dressed because it was his last day. The next part of the chapter begins from "Why the old men" till "it was the most beautiful." Little Franz developed a soft corner for Mr. M. Hamill. His teacher had spent 40 years in the school very faithfully. Today in the class, what the little boy saw, what the narrator saw was, old people were also sitting at the back benches because they felt sorry for not getting a chance to study well in their childhood days. They were all sitting to applaud M. Hamill's service and a feeling of patriotism he had. While little Franz was noticing all the things, unusual things happening in the class, suddenly his name was called to recite participles. So from here we come to know that since it was the last day of the teacher, still he continued teaching. Narrator was not prepared with the rules of participles, so he fumbled. But that day, what happened? He was not scolded as usual, rather, very politely, M. Hamill made him realize of what all he missed as a student. He could learn as much as he wanted, but he missed many things. As a student or a learner, we often procrastinate things, but after some time, we understand the outcome of that. M. Hamill also points out Alsace. Alsace is a French district for delaying the learning of French. He continues blaming himself and everyone of not being able to call themselves as true French men because they have not mastered their mother tongue. He blames the parents as parents preferred to earn little money they could by sending their children to work on farms or mills. Then the teacher, he also criticizes himself for sending the children to water his flowers at the time of study. See, he also used to send the class children to water his garden at the time of study. And whenever he used to wish to go to fishing, he used to declare a holiday for all the students. So students actually suffered because of the selfish motives of the elders. In the meantime, as he was criticizing elders, he was admiring French language. The next part of the chapter begins from language in the world till his class in front of him. M. Hamill keeps praising the French language and advises the class to guard their language as it is the only way to free oneself from the prison of slavery. That is, if the person knows his mother tongue, then no one can enslave him. Knowing the mother tongue well as a language is a tool to fight domination. That day, M. Hamill taught with complete patience as he wanted to give all the knowledge he had all at once, and the narrator also understood everything as he found everything very easy to learn. First, they learnt grammar and then writing with new copies given by M. Hamill, which had France, Alsace, France, Alsace written on them. Notebooks seemed as tiny flags of patriotism roaming all over the class, hung with the help of a rod at the top of their desk. Because they were giving a message of patriotism, they were giving a message for the love of the country and the mother tongue, French. That day, everyone was interested in writing, and there was a pin drop silence with the noise of pen scratching only that could be heard. Some insects flew in the class, but all the students were busy writing that no one bothered to look at them. Even the pigeons, referred to as the little ones here in the chapter, were busy on the roof top scratching the roof. So this could be an imagination of little Franz, that pigeons were scratching the rooftop with their claws, and it seemed that they were also busy writing the task of French language. Franz, on hearing the low sound of the pigeons, he thought, will they be also taught to sing in German by the Prussians? So what this little mind is thinking, he's thinking that as the scratching sound is being heard from the roof, So he is assuming that will the Prussians be able to teach German to these pigeons also? Will these pigeons also have to leave French language? So actually the motive was the Prussian soldiers, the Prussian people, they were coming, they were domineering. So from the very next day, French language was to be stopped in the school where little Franz was studying, and German language was to be continued. While writing, when little Franz happened to look at M. Hamel, he saw his teacher sitting still. Actually, the teacher was emotional and gazing at all the things in that little room as if he was fixing everything in his mind to last forever. How hard and painful it would have been for M. Hamel to leave that place. Now it is very hard to leave a place for the teacher where he has been working from last 40 years. Suddenly he was told to leave the subject, leave the school, because from the next day German language was to be taught in the school. The next part of the chapter begins from just like that, only the desks, till school is dismissed, you may go. In the last 40 years of his service, only the desk and benches had deteriorated of being used. The walnut trees were grown up in height, and the hoop vine, a plant that M. Hamel had planted, had now twisted a bit from the windows to the roofs. So these were the only notable changes in the last 40 years. He could hear the sound of luggage being packed by his sister upstairs as they were leaving the country the following day. The teacher just had a strong mindset to cover up each lesson the last day. After writing, the next lesson was in history. Now, first they covered grammar, then writing, now history lesson. The narrator says that he will never forget this last lesson. In this class, they recited sounds of alphabets. Franz refers to the class as babies because although they all were grown up, still they were practicing phonetics in chorus. Means all of them were reciting together. Even the old author was reciting. Listening him was sarcastic as well as an emotional time. After this, the church bell rang for prayer, and at the same time, sound of musical instruments could be heard as the Prussians were returning from their exercise. M. Hamel stood up straight and looked much taller to say something, but being emotional, he was unable to utter a word. So he turned back to the blackboard and wrote on the blackboard, "Long live France," in the French language. "Long live France" was written in the French language. He bent his head against the wall and finally gave the signal to the class that it's finished and the students may go. Here we finish the explanation of the chapter. Hope you all have understood. Thank you for listening. I am sharing my WhatsApp number. Feel free to message your doubts on this number. No charges apply. Thank you.